Welcome, everybody, to the Headlocked Comics Pro Wrestling panel here. How's everybody doing today? All right, this is a wrestling crowd. That was a pretty weak reaction here. How is everybody doing today?
Yeah.
That's right. Let's make some noise here, everybody. We got a great panel here today. I am Nick Hausman. I'm the managing editor for WrestlingInc.com. I'm also the commentator for Warrior Wrestling here in Chicago. Any Warrior Wrestling fans?
Yeah.
Woo! Thank you. Appreciate the love from the panel as well. We got a great show. We got a great panel here today planned for everybody. Of course, right to my right, the man behind it all here at Headlocked Comics. We have Michael Kingston here, everybody.
Give it up for Mike.
The third most popular Kingston in wrestling.
Next to him, of course, the man, Ken Anderson. Give him a round of applause. Next to Ken, of course, everybody's favorite GCW superstar. It is Matt Cardona.
Yeah.
And, of course, a comic book author there on the end, Lan Pitts. Give him a round of applause here, everybody. Well, we have about the next hour here to talk all things Headlocked Comics, pro wrestling, comic books, action figures. We're going to get into that all here today. Michael, I'm going to start it off with you, obviously. For all the fans here in attendance today, tell me a little bit about Headlocked Comics, what it is, why you got into it, and why everybody here should get involved in reading Headlocked Comics.
Thanks. So I was a fan of wrestling and comics since I was like 8 years old. I saw George the Animal Steel on one of the first Saturday Night's main events, and I was 8 and totally mesmerized by this large man with a giant roll of fat on the back of his neck and body hair everywhere and green tongue. And sans the green tongue, I didn't realize I was looking into my future, but it was insane. Like I didn't, it was crazy, and I had been watching wrestling ever since, like in some form or another. And I'd always liked comic books, and it just felt like I would buy wrestling comic books, and nobody ever made wrestling comic books that I thought were any good. Like as a wrestling fan, they always seemed like they were made by people who didn't like wrestling. And that was a thing for years that always kind of happened when people made wrestling products. Like there was always this sort of feeling of derision in them. Like when SmackDown was on UPN and they tried to make that show The Mullets, about idiot wrestling fans trying to get wrestling fans to watch the show.
A classic.
Like it was like people couldn't, they wanted the money, but they weren't, respectful about it. Like they were just like, hey, here, give me some money. These guys suck. And I don't know. So I eventually kind of came to the understanding nobody was ever going to make the type of wrestling comic that I wanted to read as a wrestling fan. So I made it myself. I took it out to every comic book company and was summarily like laughed out of every meeting. Literally like a dude laughed in my face, like from one of the largest companies in the business. So I just decided I was gonna have to make it myself. So I worked 2 jobs for almost a year to pay for the art for the first book, the print run, convention tables. I started selling it out of my backpack at Ring of Honor shows, back on message boards. I'd get on the message board and be like, yo, I'm in the seats, buy some books or whatever. People would come, give me $5. I'd give them a comic. And then I started doing conventions, and it just sort of went from there. Like we just, one by one, I started, building a little bit of an audience. And then the cool thing that happened is I would meet wrestlers who liked what I was doing, like guys that were at shows as fans. Like I met Hurricane and Rob Van Dam and Christopher Daniels and this knucklehead. People would wanted to they liked what we were doing, wanted to get involved, and then it sort of just picked up from there. I got Jerry Lawler to do my covers, and then, it's, 10 years later, we've done, 6 successful Kickstarters. I've worked with probably 40 different wrestlers. I think we've made some really cool stuff. We've made some cool shirts, cool comics, cool art prints and stuff, and I'm really proud of the work we've done, and I'm really proud of what we've able to build it into.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, just out of reference, how many people here have actually read Headlocked Comics? Any round of applause about that? Or okay, raise of hands is good too. However you want to do it, that's fine. I'm glad you're engaging. That's wonderful. Well, Lan, I want to go to you at the end there. Mike just talked about like the difficulties of bringing pro wrestling into the comic medium in the past. What's it like for you to try to bring pro wrestling into the comic book world? How is that for you?
So I don't know if this is working, but whatever. Oh, that one works. All right, hi. So I did Boom's WWE comic on and off for like 2 years, and that was a trip in itself. Shinsuke Nakamura once thought I was really cool, so that was like life made. I'm done.
You're over. Yeah.
Yeah, wrap that shit up. I'm done.
Totally.
And it's funny because I just met Ken today, and you actually met a friend of mine, Mark Brooks, back at San Diego 2005, and he did a sketch of you, and he's now like one of Marvel's premier like cover artists, and I just thought that was a really fun coincidence. Just watch your clip of that. I was like, oh, I know both these guys kind of. So, but yeah, it's really interesting because wrestling isn't really. It's kind of its own thing. It's anytime I've done like a panel like this, I've always said that wrestling is it's a medium because it's of how you tell a story. Anywhere between from like getting a character's entrance down to his gear, you kind of get an idea, even if you've never seen the product before, any sort of company whatsoever. If you do it right, you get the idea and you can kind of tell the story from there. I think one of my favorite things to kind of explain to people who don't even watch New Japan, and I did WrestleMania in New Orleans. We were staying with a friend of mine who doesn't really watch New Japan, and we were, me and my partner were trying to explain Kazuchika Okada, and we're like, look, he wrestles so good, it rains. I don't know what's so weird about this. He makes it rain money. Like, what's so not to understand about that? So, and he just couldn't wrap him. We're like, what? I don't fucking get it. But we try to do what we can, and anyone who's never seen, like even guys who we consider like icons in the sport, like Undertaker, like what does he do? I'm like, well, he's an undead wizard. Again, what is this? It's not hard to understand if you do it right.
Man, nobody refers to the Undertaker, by the way, as an undead wizard enough. That is not a phrase I hear enough would describe the
Right. Well, I've written Taker like 4 times, and each time I've done it was a different era of him. So I kind of got the idea of like. Especially mortuary Taker was always kind of fun because the funerary arts are kind of I kind of don't dabble, but I did a lot of research of just how you make a casket and the story for pallbearer, and talks about the best wood to make caskets and what they used in the 1800s and 1900s and how that kind of evolved to what we use now. And so the fights, the actual matches, I think are the hardest thing to do because especially if you look at like a fight between like Spider-Man or like Sinister Six, he's, talking to them the entire time, just being a wise ass. And it's hard to do that, I feel like, when you're talking and you're doing like, an Irish whip or power bombing somebody, and it's really weird to try to, incorporate dialogue into that. So that's actually my least favorite part to do. I try to make it work for what I could and use like, narrative caption boxes, and I think that kind of tells the story better. Like when I did a Savage and Steamboat, I kind of did it like an epic fairy tale. So I just had like caption boxes, like it was kind of like reading the Iliad, and just something that's kind of like on par with that sort of situation.
Sure.
So yeah, it's definitely got some difficulties, but if you can do it right, you can definitely get the characters down and go from there. So.
Cool. Well, hey, Ken, Lan brought you up there. How did you get involved in all of this with Headlocked and comics and pro wrestling?
I've been a fan of comic books my whole life, and somebody, I don't remember who introduced me to you.
Jeff
Was it
Katz.
Jeff Katz? Out at San Diego?
Yeah.
Didn't you bring me out to San Diego the first time? No?
No,
Okay.
you were out with Jeff Katz in the.
Oh, that's right.
on
That's
the
right.
boat.
I can't remember what I had for breakfast this
Yeah.
morning. Yeah, and I loved it. I loved the concept of it, and I think that comic books and wrestling is just a no-brainer. It's superheroes, and by the way, when in talking about having a hard time putting dialogue while there's wrestling going on, we talk to each other all the time.
Well, I mean, yeah, obviously, but you're not like, oh, I'm gonna get you, and then you like, as you
just talk shit to each other and
Right,
try to make each other laugh. And
yeah.
That's the dialogue I want, Ken. It's like, where are we going for drinks after this match,
Right,
right?
yeah.
I'm sorry I farted in your face during that power bomb. That's the real dialogue, right? Yeah. Okay.
Interestingly enough, so Ken actually contributed a piece of art for one of our books.
Oh, cool. So, okay. Yeah, talk a little bit about that, Ken.
I've drawn my whole life. Since I was a little kid, I used to do caricatures of people. I have like books at home of drawings, and he was looking for wrestlers to actually contribute, so I asked if I could be a part of it.
Nice. I mean, has that helped you in wrestling? Like the ability to draw what you want to see and do, has that been helpful to you when you are in this business?
Nope, I don't think so.
Okay, wonderful.
I'm curious. Who are some of your favorite artists, Ken?
Oh,
Like you have to do like all time because that's a fucking rotation. But like, who are some of your favorite guys like right now?
I don't know names honestly, like of like comic
okay.
book artists. The guy that does the Batman Hush series, like I like
That's
that kind
Jim
of,
Lee,
Yeah.
the publisher of DC Comics.
All right, well, let's get to the least interesting man. I guess you're on the panel. Hi, Matt.
Hey, what's up, dude?
You haven't talked yet as part of this panel. Who were your favorite comic book heroes growing up, Matt?
Yeah, so I think like every kid, I got the comic books, but is this weird? I collected them and didn't read them. Like I just wanted them, like I wanted them still like in that protective baggie, and I didn't want like to damage them. Like even like that's how I like my toys now. Like I want everything in mint condition.
It's about to say this is like a trend in your life.
Yeah, it was just like that was it. I just like even like Goosebump books. Like I would collect them and not read them. Like I just loved the art, and I thought it was great, and it was something to collect.
You're supposed to let the pages breathe.
Yeah, well, you know. And then, you know, I've seen Mike at all these conventions, always hustling. You got to respect that, always trying to get his name out there and stuff like that. And then once I left WWE, he came to me with this idea to write a book based on our podcast characters, the Fig Story book. And he pitched it to us, and I said, you know, absolutely, let's do it. And it came out so great that I can't wait to do another one. And our fans love it, even fans who don't necessarily like comic books. It's just a cool collectible also. So if you like comics, great. But if you don't, I mean, you have to have it because it's a cool collectible. It looks great. You can't deny like the artwork. And if you read the story, it's even better. But I think so many different people can appreciate comics on different levels.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Absolutely. And how does the comic and pro wrestling and action figure world all kind of blend together? I feel like that's kind of one big community in some ways.
You know, it's crazy because I think comics were accepted long before like action figures. You know, a decade or so ago, you watched the 40-year-old virgin, and the guy was a fucking virgin with these toys. I mean, I'm not a virgin, you know, and I have all these action. I'm not a virgin. No,
what?
I'm not, no.
Oh.
And I think it's now like more accepted to collect action figures and collect whatever you want, and these cons are popping up everywhere, and they're getting more and more crowded, more and more busy. And I think that's great. Like, why should we hide that we like comics or baseball cards or video games or action figures, you know? I mean, fuck everybody else, right? If they don't like it, they're fucking boring. They're the nerds, right?
But I also think that you guys had a huge part in pushing that scene too. I mean, obviously, you know, not the only people in the space, but I think, you know, with the voices that you have and what you've done, I think you've done so much to advance that. Like,
well, I mean, I think everything has changed, not just like the wrestling world, but like the world in general. When I first came into WWE in 2007, if I went up to Undertaker or Bob Holly and said, hey, I got this cool figure at Target, they would have kicked me out of the fucking locker room, you know what I'm saying? But now, you know, I'm like going on these figure hunts and I'm bringing my shit into the locker room, and someone's like, oh, fuck, I got that for Christmas. And it's just a different generation, you know? Because my generation, we grew up with the ice cream bars and the wrestling buddies and the bed sheets, you know? Like, that generation didn't. So I don't blame them, you know? I don't blame them at all. It's just times are changing, I think.
I remember having to pretend that I didn't like cartoons anymore when I was like third grade.
Right. Yeah.
You weren't cool if you watched cartoons anymore.
well, what's funny, we were talking about this earlier, but like when I was a kid, like wrestling and comics were not cool. Like even Hulk Hogan was like the biggest star in the world or whatever, but like if you went to school, you'd still get shoved in a locker for that. You know what I mean? Like,
so I want to counter that real quick because your experience, the experience may vary. So I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia. So my first, my first live event was Starrcade '89 at the Omni in Atlanta. So WCW was huge at my high school. If you didn't watch wrestling or didn't do like fucking gangs, almost like this was outlawed in our school because the principal and shit just thought they were like gang signs, just throwing up two sweets and shit. That was done. Like so, but like no, that's
a different time.
Right, but that was
whole
like,
second generation.
Right, but it was so popular. Like when I was like 15.
Yeah, I call those kids like the 98ers because it wasn't like when I was a kid, everyone had like the Hasbros and the Wrestling Buddies 91, but then like people my age where I lived, I'm from New York, they fell off. They did not like wrestling. It was not cool. And then like 97, 98, 99, the Attitude Era, like you said, the DX shirts, NWO. But then it wasn't cool again, real fast. It wasn't cool when I was wearing my Too Cool shirt in high school. Like that wasn't cool anymore.
Right. No. It was just so weird. Like your mom, like, hey, can I have $20 for this dick sucking shirt, please? And just like, what? Like, yeah, can I have $20 for the dick sucking shirt, please? It was just a completely different experience for me. So, but I never fell off. But my dad was also a general manager at Walmart, so I got spoiled until he.
What?
Yeah.
Oh.
I got like all the Super Kenner, like all the Super Power stuff from Kenner, all the Masters of the Universe stuff, and he was kind of skeptical about this, but I felt like it completed the universe when I asked for the Princes of Power stuff. But all the Hasbros, like all the WWF, like I have like a Matchbox Voltron, I have all this shit. And just like my collection is stupid. Anytime someone talks about like their collection, like I love your collection. Anytime I'm like, let me see your collection. What do you collect? What's like your big thing? So my big thing is like my complete Fright Zone with like my puppet still intact, and then my Clamp Champ, and then the Master of the Universe movie figures that were a gift to me by Bill Stout, the costume designer for the movie. So that was a huge big thing too. But yeah, no, it just wasn't cool. I remember that turning point of like when Power Rangers was epic. And then literally 2 years later, you still watch that shit? I'm like, yeah, sorry, my bad. Don't be my friends.
Like when I was a kid, like if you knew somebody that liked wrestling and comics, like you were automatically like brothers.
Oh,
that was
Oh,
like,
yeah. That
Venn
Venn diagram like solidified like a blood oath.
Like you'd be like, oh, you like this too? Like, or if you'd be at school, you wouldn't talk about it at school, then you'd see somebody at like a WWE, like at a house show, and you'd be like, oh, hey, what's up?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're bros, you know? Like it was like a weird nerd brotherhood.
But it's so weird now because, I've been writing comics only for about 4 years, but I've been working in comics for about 15, from retail to doing stuff at comicbook.com, Newsarama, Shotgun, Fangoria. Now I'm at GameSpot. And so there's a lot of people who don't get wrestling, people who work in comics, and it's kind of frowned upon. I was tabling at New York 2 years ago with a really prolific writer by the name of Chris Sabella, and he just did not get it. And he's like, I mean, we talked about it a little time because I usually have a sign at my table that says "Ask me about wrestling" because I'm not a carnival barker. I can't be like, hey, come over, hey, you like a comic? I can't do that. My anxiety is too bad, and I can't handle rejection well. So people would just come up to me and we'll just talk. And so that happened the whole weekend. And eventually I was like, so who are some of your favorite wrestlers? And he's like, I don't know. Are the Von Erichs around? I was like, oh, buddy, oh no.
Well, they are. The Von Erichs are still very much around in MLW.
Buddy.
Yeah.
But like a John Cena cosplayer came up, and I was like, oh my God, it's John Cena. And we just had I was like, the champ is here. We took photos and everything, and he's like, that's John Cena. And he Googles John Cena on his phone. He's like, that doesn't look like that guy. I'm like, Chris, Jesus Christ. Because it's not him, but he tweeted out like, oh, John Cena just came on my table. And everyone flipped out in the comments. I was like, oh no, I got to put this shit back in the bottle.
So when I mean, the weird thing is like when I tried to get Headlocked going, I mean, like conventions and everything, like I got wrestling into probably like 15, almost 20 conventions that had like bans on wrestling.
Yeah.
Like they just wouldn't like. I did a convention and I'd be like, oh, I write this comic book about wrestling, and they'd be like, okay, yeah, you can come. And I'm like, well, I want to bring Jerry. And they're like, well, we don't allow wrestlers. I'm like, well, he did art on my book. And they're like, all right, well, we'll advertise him as an artist. So you see all these like artists, and then like a dude with a crown on his head in Artist Alley. So we would go show up and we'd blow the doors off the place, and then they booked wrestling.
I met Mike about maybe 10 or so years ago at MegaCon in Florida, and that was the situation. It was just literally him and Jerry, but he was like, hey, you like wrestling and comics? And I was like, I like both of those things as a matter of fact. Let's be friends. And then that's how it literally worked. So I still have my first edition Headlocked, like back from like, I think it's 2010, 2011, something crazy like that. But yeah,
there's a ton of shows that wouldn't allow wrestling. I mean, there's still like in 2019, Jerry and I got turned down for a show in Denver that were like, oh, we don't want wrestlers.
Yeah.
So it's like a weird, like, it's like 2D men in tights in a morality play of good and evil is super nerdy, but like 3D men in tights in a morality play of good and evil, is it not nerdy enough? Like,
right. I don't know. As a fan of like tokusatsu stuff, so like Ultraman, Kamen Rider, Super Sentai, and all that stuff, like it spoke to me on it down to like my marrow. So, I mean, it's just something I've never gotten out of my system, and that's so weird to me. Please come to DragonCon at some time. We will welcome you with open arms.
Well, and Matt and Ken, I kind of want to ask you guys, we're talking about wrestlers, kind of being stigmatized, but you guys are obviously big, notable wrestlers. Do you guys ever feel that stigma in the entertainment industry? Are there guardrails you feel for you?
I think so. I think there still is. There's still that stigma that wrestling is fake for some reason. But of course it is. We tell stories of good versus evil. It's like Iron Man's fake too.
Yeah, like all these
Friends
superhero
was
movies
taped
are
in front
fake.
of a live studio audience.
What?
Yeah.
Like,
Wait,
Yeah.
are you kidding me? Iron Man is fake?
What?
So, I was doing a signing in New Jersey for Mania, just on I think the last WrestleMania special, and this woman came in with her daughter who was dressed like Blue Demon Jr., and it was amazing. And she's like, "Yeah, I just kind of like mildly encourage her on this, but like, isn't it fake?" And I looked this woman dead in like her soul, and I said, "It's as real as you want it to be."
That's right.
And that's how I still feel. Like it's as real as you want it to be. From like a kid level who doesn't understand to adults who are like, yeah, this is really cool shit. So yeah, it's as real as you want it to be.
So these communities. Go ahead. Sorry.
We went out to I went out to LA a few years ago with TNA. We were debuting on a new network, and it was in front of the Critics Association. So all the like TV critics were. You'd give like a 5-minute presentation, and then you did a 10-minute Q&A. And the questions that we fielded from all these critics were just they didn't like wrestling. They didn't appreciate the fact that we were there. So,
as a former member of the TCA, I apologize.
One of my favorite things that I get to do is, the story of Headlocked is a theater major who drops out of college to chase his dream of becoming a wrestler, and we do these Norman Rockwell covers with Jerry, and so people come up that have, don't like wrestling or they have no idea or whatever, they see the covers and they're like, oh, is this old-timey stuff? And then I'm like, I explain the story to them, and I'll get people to buy them that have no interest in wrestling. I'll always tell them, like, did you watch Rocky, right? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, you watch boxing on the reg? No? Okay, it's the same thing. So then, like, the people will buy it and they'll come back and like, man, I had no idea, I had no idea that much went into wrestling or whatever, like, and that's pretty cool. Like, that's always kind of what I wanted to do, was sort of, be somewhat instructional and kind of hide the medicine in the food, so to speak. You tell a fun story, but then you kind of drop a little bit of knowledge in there while you're there. But I mean, I do like to think that I've not converted a couple people, but I've definitely converted a ton of wrestling fans towards comics, which is neat. But I've definitely converted some people, or at least had them gain more of an appreciation of wrestling.
I'm definitely going to give you a rec list, Ken, if that's okay.
What's that?
I'm going to give you a recommendation list for comic reading. Okay? Yeah.
Please
Good.
do.
Yeah.
I was a big Mad Magazine fan when I was a
Okay,
kid. So
yeah.
Sergio, I'm going to butcher his name, Aragones.
Yeah, Argones. You got it. The letters were there.
So these two communities, pro wrestling and comic books, what do you guys think they can learn from each other? Like, what do you think are things that comic books could maybe bring to pro wrestling, or pro wrestling better bring to comic books?
It's all make-believe. It's creators doing the best they can and wanting to tell the best story they can. Don't hate on each other. Like, it's just really weird how people are like, that's wrestling. I was like, yeah, it's awesome. Sorry you've never felt anything, watching wrestling. That's on you. I try not to get too emotional watching wrestling sometimes, but that's on me. So, but it's the same deal with comics. Like, yeah, if you don't feel anything reading Batman, that's fine. But there's like a myriad and plethora of good comics out there across the board from all genres. So if you don't like, it's the same deal with wrestling. If you don't like death matches, that's fine. There's going to be something else. There's going to be a wrestler and comic for you out there.
Yeah, definitely. There's like the mainstream comics, there's the underground comics. Same with wrestling too. There's those big companies like WWE and AEW, and the smaller independents. And who's to say like what's better? It's really what your preference is, And you could like both, and you could dislike one thing and like another thing from the other. It's whatever you like. There's no rules to what you could be a fan of.
The thing that has always been interesting to me is wrestling and comics are so similar. Like, obviously to me as what they're telling you or what they're showing you in terms of like superheroes versus wrestlers, but like as businesses too. Like, for so long when people say that they're a fan of comics, they're really a fan of superheroes. Like, if you say, oh, what's your favorite comic book movie? Like, nobody's like, oh yeah, Road to Perdition, I love it, like, or Ghost World or History of Violence, like, yo, Green Lantern. Actually, nobody says Green Lantern. But, and it's the same with wrestling. There's so many people who say, oh, I'm a wrestling fan, but they're just a WWE fan. Like, they're not willing to sort of consume anything outside of that. So, as a guy who does a non-WWE comic book in a non-superhero comic book, I've been sort of trying to fight both of those stigmas forever. And it's weird how people find themselves in like nerd blockages and stuff. But like the creator of Lucha Underground came over to my booth at, I think it was at this show maybe. And he was like, I was like, oh, you should check out my stuff. And he's like, oh, I'm not really a comics guy. I'm like, really? I'm like, of all people, you're the guy that did that to me? I'm like, how many people have you had to sell on the Lucha Underground and be like, oh, it's not like regular wrestling? And he goes, oh shit, I just did that to you, didn't I?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, here's a guy that has to fight this whole battle his whole way, but then he was doing it in another thing. So that's the interesting part. But the boundaries are definitely changing. I mean, nobody ever would have thought that death matches would be so mainstream, or the GCW selling out the
I don't know, Matt. You think death matches are mainstream?
Well, because of me, they are.
No, but I mean, no joke though. But I mean, you've literally done a ton for that community. I mean, and then people are more interested now in like different Walking Dead, Preacher, like other types of series that aren't necessarily superhero stuff. So I mean, the boundaries are definitely widening, but it still can be a little. I don't know. People can still find themselves stuck in a box.
There's a saying we kind of take in the comics community. Every comic is somebody's first comic, and that's definitely the same deal with wrestling. You don't come out with this stuff come out of the womb like completely initiated. So like, I mean, I was lucky enough to have like my first wrestling match be like Sting, Flair, Muta, like Luger, Doom, Road Warriors, and that kind of imprinted me from there. But yeah, you're not always going to be. But I mean, if you don't like Matt's death match stuff, fine. He's entertaining enough by himself. You can find something that you do like. Same deal with Ken here. If you don't like this one match, you're going to find something like this. I mean, I have a Danhausen shirt on. If you don't like Danhausen's wrestling in general, whatever,
fuck that. If anybody does not like Danhausen,
well, let's give Danhausen some credit here. First, he's one of the hottest things in wrestling today.
Absolutely.
I have never ever seen a Danhausen match, and I think most of his fans have not.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? They just love
what?
it.
I've seen tons of Danhausen matches.
I bet a lot of his fans haven't seen an actual match. It's just this fucking Danhausen guy and his videos and his merch.
It's true.
And his aura, and he's
he's such a kind person. We became friends last year during the pandemic because we're both like toy nerds, and I was like, hey, is this weird if I want to be friends? Because I feel like I always see like on your stuff on Twitter, you're looking for things. I get Hasbro comps. If you would just want something, I can like just send you. Is that cool? And he's like, oh yeah, holy shit, wow. No one. So I introduced him and Warhorse to Todd McFarlane and just like figure it out. But Todd doesn't give a shit about these guys, but they're entertaining and they're personal enough like that. But even when I interviewed him for GameSpot, I was like, what is your finisher move again? I totally forgot. Show me. Shit, that's on me. And he's like, it's just to go to sleep, but it's the good Nighthausen. I'm like, yeah all right.
He has figured it out. He is, at these conventions, he's always killing it, always a huge line.
Yeah.
And like, he appeals to so many different people, and he's unique. He's figured it out. Whatever, I don't know how he came up with this, but he has figured it out.
Well, and on that, Matt, you're Matt Cardona. He's Ken Anderson. You guys come from an era which is more like, I guess, realistic based, coming out of the Attitude Era, kind of Monday Night War era. Is it kind of going back to more character-based wrestlers getting over right now? I mean, you look at Danhausen, Warhorse, Dan the Dad, Alley Cat, all these people that have picked up gimmicks and given themselves a coat of paint outside of just like who they are to kind of market themselves.
I mean, in this day and age, there are so many great athletes. They do stuff that I could never even attempt to do. So if you can't do all that stuff, you got to figure out a different way to stick out with, Ken over here with the Mr. Kennedy, like right off the bat, yes, he's the guy. He could, if he didn't have that, he's just the guy in trunks. He's just a regular good wrestler. But he found that he connected with, and that's why the audience wanted to see him. I don't do any cool moves. Sometimes I go to these indies, and I'm like, dude, I have 5 or 6 things, bro. And I don't, but I can't, it's to me. But I was always that fan who was drawn to the storytelling and the everything like that. The characters.
But that's what you did with your YouTube channel. Sure. You were one of the first guys. I was like, how come no one is talking about this?
Yeah.
Right. We didn't have a group chat, but it was just a group of friends because I used to work at Toys R Us. and we would just sign off doing our walkies or stuff like woo woo woo. And it was like underneath the radar, and management had no idea what we were doing. But we were all like watching your YouTube channel and shit, like in 2006, 2007.
Yeah, you just got to find something. Everyone can be like a great wrestler. You have to find a way to stick out, especially now, like with social media. It's great because like Twitter, YouTube, all that stuff, it's free, so it's like free publicity. But everyone has it, so you have to figure out your way to stand out and find your niche. And someone like Danhausen, he found it. I've never seen a Danhausen match, but I love Danhausen. I'm a fan of Danhausen without ever seeing him wrestle.
I would argue that's always been the way. The characters always ruled wrestling. It's just that I think, people looked at Hogan and they're like, oh, I got to get muscles. But I mean, if muscles were all you needed, the Warlord would have been the biggest dude ever.
Right.
You know what I mean?
100%.
People looked at Flair and they need, I need 30 near falls in a match. But I mean, anybody can do that. I mean, they were both all-time great characters. But I think coming up with an original character is a lot harder than just, doing 30 near falls in your match. So.
But the realism aspect, I guess, like when I was at WWE, it was always stressed to us, like, what would you do in a real fight? This would never happen in a real fight. Man, now you've got like invisible man matches and stuff like that.
God,
I mean, not going on
art.
WWE, but and I love that. I love the fact that like people are just able to express themselves and have fun.
Tell me about the bar fight you were in where you went, Mister, then the guy just.
I mean, I even think about like Ophidian. It's the YouTube clip of the most illegal move ever, and it's Ophidian and Shikara like doing his snake dance. Brilliant. It's art. Like that's the best thing ever. It's just hypnotizing, and everybody from the back comes down, and then just start. I'm like, that's great. That's what I'm talking about when wrestling is like story and art in itself. Like I wouldn't have thought about that. But even like Danhausen's gimmick, how would you describe your gimmick? Beetlejuice and Conan. I would have never thought of that. Christ. Like I would have never put like those things together to make this, and it's brilliant. So
how do you guys feel about, there's that topic come up more often than not recently about, WWE possibly selling to like a Disney or something. Like Disney's done a real great job with Marvel taking those characters, fleshing out those stories. Do you think there's room for pro wrestling and WWE to kind of grow by looking at that model that Marvel's doing right now with Disney?
I mean, I don't know if they're selling. I try not to get involved in the dirt sheet stuff, but I think, Disney has done a great job with Star Wars and Marvel and making these things that are already huge even bigger, creating these lands in theme parks. Imagine if there was a WWE land in a theme park and then you have these, like Rey Mysterio's walking around doing meet and greets. Not really Rey, but someone with a mat, there's definitely a way to market that. And I definitely think they could do it. And maybe that's why, they're condensing. Listen, the business side of it, I don't give a fuck. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't care if they sell, they sell. If they don't, they don't. But I think, Disney has proved that they're doing some great things. I'm sure some diehards in the Marvel and Star Wars community don't like it. But for like a fan like me, I love it because I love theme parks. I love going on these rides. So buy everything.
I'm just waiting for the crossover then, like, I don't know. Hulk Hogan's in the Creature Cantina or something.
Undertaker and Haunted Mansion. Let's do it.
So Lan, for Lan, when you were working on the WWE comics, what input were you getting from WWE about what they wanted out of their comic books?
So they wanted stories, and I didn't know how obscure or weird they wanted to get because they did this whole like sample thing with Rob Gilroy and I can't remember who else did it, but it was New Day using the time machine. So I'm like, oh, it's all in world. Okay, cool. That's fine, but we can like step outside that. So I they turned down a few things I'm still kind of bummed about, but they said yeses to a lot more than no's. But the one thing I'm really I still get bummed about doing is they're like, okay, so we want to do this Then Now Forever special where it's like everything across the board. And I was like, can I do a Max Moon origin story? And they're like, what? I'm like, well, he's built from space. Like, let's do this. And they're like, how would you even do that? I was like, well, okay, he's a fighter on the moon. And
we'll start there.
We'll start there, and like he's a fighter like inside the moon, and it's like underground like gladiatorial stuff. But he refuses to take a fight, so he's on the lam, and then he crash lands, and he's like, well, whoever wherever I land, they have to understand that I'm ready to conquer them. And then he opens it up. He opens the Bombay doors to his rocket ship, and he's outside Titan Towers. But he couldn't adapt to like Earth's gravitation, so that's why he lost all the time. So they're like, well, that's really good, but we kind of got beef with that guy. I'm like, fine, whatever. Oh. So the other thing they turned down and I was really mad about was I wanted Shinsuke Nakamura to be Ultraman and Joe to be like this kaiju because his entrance music is goddamn Godzilla music. So, and Knox already a huge Kamen Rider and Ultraman fan, so the NXT Championship was going to be the belt buckle, and then his hand symbol was going to be the attack. And they're like, that's a little too niche. I'm like, fine, whatever, damn. But yeah, for like Undertaker, I ended up writing an Undertaker origin story. They're like, hey, we have the Survivor Series special up. We want you to do the Undertaker origin story and how he landed in Survivor Series. So I was like, all right, sure. Well, okay. So I sent in an outline, and they're like, oh, we can't use Brother Love. We don't have Pritchard's likeness. I'm like, what? How do you not have your shit? And they're like, we couldn't use Jack Tunney. I had Mike has a really good pitch. He got turned down for it, but we couldn't use Jack Tunney and stuff. So they never gave us a list of people we couldn't use. It was like a guess who situation.
Oh, man.
Because, people would take the list and then put it up and then, whatever. But so, yeah, there were certain people we couldn't use. And Pritchard was one of them, but of course, after it was done, he signed back up with them. So whatever. But it was sort of like, okay, well, let's just have DiBiase in the desert looking like he got information from a friend about like this man in black in the middle of this desert, and he finds the Undertaker working on like a coffin, and he's like, I'll give you money if you come fight for me. He's like, I'm not in your petty, games. He's like, what do you want? Bodies. And he's like, oh, well, I can do that. So, and then it's just him killing everyone at Survivor Series. And then that's how he came up to be part of Ted DiBiase's team. But it was such a weird thing because I wrote it as an 8-pager. And they're like, oh, well, we got somebody else to do something else. We need to make it a 4-pager. Fuck me. So I have to rewrite it to format 4 pages. And they're like, oh, well, WWE actually likes this. Can we make it a 6-pager instead? Oh my God. I rewrote this thing 3 times in a weekend. And so that was, they paid me for the rewrites, but they just
sounds familiar.
Yeah. They just wanted good stories represented, but it was really weird. My buddy Kelly Williams, who was the artist on the series, he's here. I think he's at table P04. WWE was not happy how he drew Virgil, so he redrew Virgil 4 times, and so he has the pages done. And then inserts of the panels where different editions of Virgil were done. Because,
I gotta see this.
I want to see the Virgil art. Yeah.
So because I bought a few of the pages that he did and everything, but yeah, there's my buddies Sean and Adam bought the Virgil panels at Heroes Con years ago, but it's just why are you nitpicking this of all things? So, but. Yeah, they just wanted real weird stories, but we couldn't use certain people, and it was really weird to try to navigate the waters without some of their biggest stars at the time.
So to Matt and Ken, how was it? So he's talking about pitching to WWE comic book stories. How does that compare to your experience pitching wrestling stories, I guess, to WWE?
Oh man, I'm sure Ken has different. Listen, I have pitched literally hundreds of ideas, but I will say that some of them have gone through, and some of them are ones that have changed my career. For instance, the Edgehead story was our idea, where we would be Edge's Edgeheads, the 2 guys that looked like Edge, and we'd be hidden under the ring, and we'd hide there, and then Undertaker thinks he's beating up Edge, but it's this other Edge, and then Batista thinks he's beating up Edge, but it's the other Edge, and the real Edge comes out and he fucks them both and he wins the belt. That was our pitch.
Yeah.
The problem was Adam Edge was out with an injury and we didn't know him because we debuted and he was still out, so we had to ask for his email address and email him. And because we needed his approval, and he was super cool. He could have said fucking no because we were nobodies. He didn't need us. He was already a top guy. But if he didn't take the chance on us, we probably would have got, because we were doing the Major Brother thing, we probably would have got fired within 6 months because we were doing nothing, sitting catering every day. And then Edge took us under his wing. The next day we were going on this 6-month run, beating up Undertaker and Shawn Michaels and Batista. But if Edge didn't say yes, it wouldn't have happened.
So Ken, how about you? How does your experience pitching to WWE go?
There's a lot of guys will say that you always have to pitch in a certain way, especially when you're dealing with writers, because they're the writers. You're the wrestler, we're the writers. Let us do our job, you do your job. So, people will say you have to present it in a way that it sounds like it's their idea almost, and And then there's a lot of situations, it's never happened to me, but I've heard of situations where somebody will pitch something and they will say no, and then 2 weeks later somebody else is doing that.
Oh, that's happened to me before. That's happened.
Wait, so what was stolen from you?
I couldn't even give you the exact thing, but I think it's happened with a lot of people. And I learned, and I learned it a little too late in my career. Fuck these writers. You just got, if you want them done, you got to go to Vince, because a lot of these writers are too afraid to like pitch an idea to Vince.
Yeah.
So I would just go and talk to Vince, and like, if he would say no, at least I know the answer is no, as opposed to this writer dilly-dallying, being too afraid to ask Vince or something like that.
And Vince likes it
coming
when
back and be like, oh, I talked to him.
Vince likes it when guys have balls too, like really.
Yeah, I wish I would have learned that earlier, because he's an intimidating guy, Vince. Even to this day, every time I went to his office, I'd like, oh, I'm going to talk to Vince today. You know what I'm saying? Like,
He looks like he looks right through you,
Yeah,
like, into
right.
your soul, doesn't he? Like,
yeah, but he was always very like respectful of like my conversation, and like he didn't take the majority of my ideas, but at least I knew right then, okay, that idea's done, as opposed to pitching it to somebody and then like, oh yeah, we're working on it, oh, we're going to circle back to this. Like, oh God, fuck that.
You remember anything that got shot down that you really, really liked that that never happened?
One thing I pitched was something where I would get fired and then like start doing like indies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then come back. It was like there was more to it than that. And that's something I actually pitched to Vince, and he seemed to like it. He's like, he just threw me off on some other writers. So maybe he didn't like it and knew we were just going to go in circles. But then it got to a point where it actually got like into a script where like the GM would fire me. I'm like, no, I don't want to get fired by the GM. I want like to get fired in real life.
I want you to put out a tweet with the photo.
Yeah,
It's
but
like,
turns out it didn't happen. I got fired in real life, but it's not part of the storyline.
but you did. But you are on a successful indie run
That's
now.
true. So,
you know?
so maybe I'm working for Vince.
Yes, exactly, right? I had heard, Matt, that when you were released that you would be maybe one of the guys to return to the company. So this is all a ruse. I get it, yeah.
You never know.
I know.
You never know.
I like that. I like the mystery around that. And Mike, as we're going, oh shoot, and there's not even a lid on this. I'm glad there was no water in it. As we're going down the line talking about pitching to WWE, you work with Jerry. Obviously, you are the predominant comic book in the pro wrestling space. Have you ever talked to WWE about doing anything? How have those conversations gone?
I wrote stuff for the WWE comic. I co-wrote a story with AJ Styles about his debut at the Rumble. I co-wrote a story with Samoa Joe about why he and Nakamura weren't drafted in the first brand split. Like, I tried to use my opportunity to make stories to fill up their logic holes.
Sure. And how was that experience?
It's funny. I had a real easy time. The one thing that was a pain was I wrote a Bret Hart story, and it was in the WWE Forever special, and I had originally conceived it. It was Bret's first match, and he's with Stu, and like Stu's kind of giving him a pep talk, and like through that pep talk, we can go through like a retrospective of Bret's career, and then it ends with him going out to wrestle Flair when he wins the belt. So they're like, oh, they love this story. Like, but you can't use Stu Hart.
Again,
What?
we were never given a list of
Right, and I'm
people we
like-
couldn't use.
So I changed it to Jimmy Hart. And that actually worked out because
Same.
like the problem was obviously Jimmy Hart was a heel and Bret, they weren't on good terms at the time, so I had to just make it where he was, Jimmy Hart was psyching up Bret and sort of giving him his plan for him as a talent. And then at the end, he comes in. He's like, "Yo, I know we're not cool, but I just want you. I was right, baby," like that. And but then they were like, "Oh, you can't." It starts out with him saying, "You're going to the land of the giants," and it was Andre the Giant throwing him out of the Battle Royal.
We couldn't use Andre.
Can't use Andre the Giant.
You couldn't use Andre?
Again,
They've got their own
navigating
estate.
through like the top stars and shit
Right.
was just like.
So I used Big John Studd for that, and then like you couldn't use so many tag teams. So like I used Shawn Michaels as a rocker, and then Shawn Michaels as a single. I used Davey Boy Smith as a British Bulldog, and then used Davey Boy Smith as a single. Like you had to play with it, and it ended up coming out good, and it was really cool. Like Jimmy Hart read it and actually told me he was like, "This is incredible." He's like, "This is great." He's like, "Can I buy a bunch of these from you?" I'm like, "No, it's cool. You can have them." I mean, but he was really really cool about the story. He was really happy with it. So I felt good about it. Everything that we did was fun. AJ and Joe, I've known them forever, so like they're super easy to collaborate with. We did Headlocked stories together. We did those. So it was fun. But my big pitch that got turned down was that I was super excited about was A Day in the Life of Jack Tunney.
Yeah, that's what he brought up. So what is this Jack Tunney thing here? Yeah.
So it was just Jack Tunney gets up, got the same suit in his closet, puts it on, gets his coffee, goes to work, and then just like the idea of like those ESPN Sports Center commercials where like athletes are there, so it would just be like, Little Beaver shows up and wants revenge against King Kong Bundy, and like, Jake the Snake has like a big reptile ship there, and like it's just like chaos, like this like weird Animal House thing. And, like Nikolai Volkov is crying on the front steps because people keep interrupting the Russian national anthem, and like it was just this sort of fun, like him as like this sort of father of this like lovable weird family of like characters, and it would have been really really good, but I always thought about just making it and like doing it as like fan art or something at some point, but who knows? Maybe one day.
Sure. Well, are there any comic book storylines that you guys have ever read where you're like, man, I'd really like to adapt this to pro wrestling, or vice versa? Like, do you see any crossover in the storytelling kind of elements of these two mediums, outside of just like the characters being superhero-like, or no? All right, this is a terrible question because
No, it's not. I had to think about it.
it's a good question, but it hurt all their heads.
Think about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's such a good question, but there's no answer.
Well, I see, not really answering that question, but Michael did that story on Nick Gage and the Christmas story that's coming out. I think that's so unique. I think like Nick Gage could be like a great comic book character because it's so different. It's like your anti-hero.
Yeah.
But he could be this lovable guy, but it's almost like he's this guy who like attacks people with pizza cutters and broken light tubes, but he's a good guy. You like him, and he's like great with kids. He's like to see him interact with his fans. It's like you would see. If you just look at him, you think he's this villain, this horrible human being, but he's such a sweetheart. The fans love him, and the fans like absolutely love him. Like he's the opposite of what a baby face should be. He has no teeth. He's been to jail. He attacks people with pizza cutters, but he's a good guy. What?
Yeah.
Sure. Well, and that's the thing is like WWE is more of like the Marvel. You're talking GCW is more like a gritty kind of graphic novel type feel where I feel like.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
It's sort of like because Shikara had tried to get a comic, and I wanted to work with them, and then things happened. But like. No, I take a look at like the rise of like The Rock. I think that's a really cool he's almost kind of similar to the rise of like Dick Grayson. Anyone or like one of the Hardy Boys is similar because these people grow up in front of us, and it's so weird to think of like Jeff or Edge or anything that's like almost 50, and it's like I remember being 15 and he was like 22, 23,
right.
And. We watch these people grow up, and we grow up with them in some cases. So, I mean, there's a lot of parallel there. There's a lot of parallel between, like, ascending certain mantles and making it, there's always a big thing with when there's a new Justice League roster and who gets on the team. It's something to do with, like, Avengers rosters changing, and it's who finally becomes an Avenger, who finally becomes an X-Man, who graduates the Xavier Academy, and, who gets that sort of situation. So, yeah, there's definitely a lot of parallel and crossover there. So.
All right, everybody. Well, we are coming to a close here on time. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Is there any final thoughts from the panel here? Mike, anything you want to say about Headlocked Comics to take us home here today?
So we're down at booth 1283, and Matt brought it up, but I just got my a couple advanced copies of our Nick Gage Christmas comic. It's our version of Rudolph, and it's one of the coolest things. Jill Thompson did a cover for it. It's one of my favorite things we've ever done. So I have a couple of copies down there. Come check it out. We've got books, prints, signed art, and then obviously these guys are there. The Inspiration's there till 3 o'clock, and Jake and Lance Archer are right around the corner from us. So come check us out.
Cool. Thank you guys so much for coming out today. Please go check out Headlocked.
Wait.
Oh, wait.
Lan, where you at?
Hey. I'm at E16. I have copies of my DIY comic that'll be self-published, but Image is going to be putting out in backups for Radiant Black starting in like 2 weeks. But just get these comics. I don't have to take them home with me. All right. That's it. E16. Come talk about wrestling or Power Rangers or whatever. That's fine.
Awesome. And hey, Matt, you're looking at me. You got something you want to say?
I have nothing. Come meet and greet us so I can feed my pets.
There we go. Wonderful. Help Matt feed his pets. Thank you all so much for coming out today. Have a great rest of your C2E2.